So this is going to be a great podcast today because this comes directly from your generation, right?
Yes, sir.
So the other day you sent me a post. Was it a post?
It was
all caps.
Yeah, it was a tweet.
It was a tweet. Okay. So somebody tweets this thing, and you said, "What do you think about it?" So I'm like, "Let me see it."
Yeah.
And we read it, and we immediately started chatting about it, right?
Yeah.
So we decided to do a podcast on it. And why don't we kick it off? And by the way, the question that came from this is, why doesn't the U.S. government provide free health care to all U.S. citizens, right? That's really what it comes down to. But you got to read the way this guy articulates it because it's fucking brilliant, right?
He's very angry.
There's one word that I love. You don't even know how great this word is because of your generation. But go ahead and read it.
Okay. It makes me fucking crazy when I say to someone that I want health insurance and they ask me, who's going to pay for it? Me, you fucking dunce. The feds take 25% of my fucking paycheck. I don't want you to spend it to make...
Right, okay. Yeah, you cut one part out, right?
I want health care.
Okay. By the way, you cut out the part that we're not going to talk about because it was offensive, but he said he doesn't want the money being spent on this other thing, which he doesn't like, but it's very controversial, and we're not doing that, right?
Yes, sir.
But anyway, his big thing is, I want health care. I'm paying 25% of my taxes, you dunce. I love the word dunce because when I was a kid, that was a normal word you call people. You call your friends who did something stupid a dunce. There used to be a dunce cap.
Yes.
You'd sit in the corner with the dunce cap. Now, that was before my generation. But it was a thing that was like in cartoons by then.
It's like a white cap.
Yeah, it's like a white cap with like a cone at the top, and it's like a dunce cap. Yeah. I love that he used dunce because I have not heard that word in 30 years, maybe 40 years. It's a great word.
Let's start using it.
Yeah, dunce. It's a great word. Yeah. But anyway, so here's the thing. So here's one thing that, one big problem that people have that don't read a lot. They think we're rich. They think the U.S. is rich. They think we're the richest country in the world because we have the highest GDP in the world. But when you look at a household, like let's say that you have a neighbor that has the nicest car, he's got a built-in swimming pool, he travels to all these great countries, and you say, wow, that guy's rich. But he's got $500,000 in credit card debt. Is he rich? No. He makes a lot of money, but he spends so much that he's in debt up to his ass. So is he rich? And I don't know. I don't think he's rich. If he can't control the spending, it's not real money.
He appears.
Yeah. Because, if he could turn it off anytime he wanted, then you'd say, oh, he's rich because he just has to turn the dial and money will come in, but money won't go out. But if you're addicted to the spending, then you can never break it, which means you're not really rich, right? Yeah. In fact, there's this woman, a congresswoman, and I don't remember where she was from, maybe Massachusetts, but I heard a quote from her. I saw an interview of her one day, and she wants free health care. And she goes, oh, the money's there. We're the richest country in the world. The money's there. And I'm thinking to myself, does she even understand the budget at all, and the deficit, and what we spend money on? Most people don't, which is why they think we should get free health care. And another thing I think your friend said is, well, don't they have free health care in Sweden and Norway?
Yeah.
Right? Why do they get it if we don't when we're richer than they are? So we're going to talk about that today, okay? Yeah. It's a great topic. Yeah. Everybody should know about this topic if you ask me.
Yeah.
So a couple things that we have to, background points. Nothing is free in this world, right? Nothing. Now, I was going to say, nothing is free except your parents' love and the sun's warmth. But the sun's warmth isn't really free because you get skin cancer, right? But, it's mostly free. And your parents' love is mostly free, but some parents put conditions on that.
Yes.
But nothing's free in this world. If you want something and you don't pay for it, the only way to get it is for somebody else to pay for it. Somebody has to pay for everything, including healthcare. Now, one thing that people say is, why don't we have Medicare for all? Have you heard of Medicare?
Yeah.
Have you heard of Medicaid?
Yes.
Okay, so you know the difference? Most people don't.
I don't know.
Okay, I didn't really know the difference until about 4 hours ago either when I looked it up. But Medicare is basically for people over 65 and some people with disabilities, right? That's Medicare. Medicaid is for people who are financially busted, right? They don't have any money. Yeah. Oh, you're on that? Okay, there you go. So you know what Medicaid is.
Yeah.
Medicaid, by the way, pays for a lot more than Medicare, I think. It pays for things Medicare doesn't pay for. But Medicare, by the way, it's not free for two reasons. Number one, taxpayers pay for it. We pay for it. Number two, if you're a Medicare recipient, you have a premium to pay. In fact, I looked at a thing. If there's like Plan A, which is like free, but it's the most basic thing. But if you want Plan B, C, or D, I think it is, and I'm not a Medicare expert. I just learned about it a few hours ago. But you pay premiums. Like I saw one was like $174 a month for Plan B or something like that. But anyway, the point is, that's not even free. But we have it, right? So the question then is, free healthcare. Where does the government, where does the federal government get its money to pay for stuff? Do you know?
Taxpayers.
Taxpayers, right? Taxes. It's not just individuals, it's corporations too, but taxes pay for everything. So we have individual income tax, we have corporate tax, right? We have payroll tax. You know what payroll tax is? Payroll tax is like, I think individuals pay 6.2% of their income. Companies pay the other 6.2%, so it's 12.4%, but it covers things like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, but that's a way the federal government gets money. They have something called excise tax. People think of it as sin taxes, customs duties, right? Yeah. Estate taxes, gift taxes, but these are taxes that give the federal government money and they buy stuff with it. And if the federal government doesn't have enough money to buy the things they need, they borrow it.
What's the total?
Okay, so let's talk. What's the total? What's the total? How much do we make in income tax or in all taxes, all federal taxes every year? It changes every year. 2024 was 4.92 trillion. 4.92 trillion. That's a shitload of zeros, right? Yeah. Let's just say 5 trillion for easy discussion because it's sort of close to that, right? So where does that come from? Now, I know you know, right? Because we made a list of these things, right? Where corporate tax.
Corporate tax. You want to?
Yeah, give me the list.
Federal,
if you have.
So we have
corporate tax.
And you want to talk about all the
530 billion for corporate tax. Okay, yeah. You see that?
530 billion.
What about individual income tax?
2.43 trillion.
Okay, so let's just this is all going to add up to eventually $4.92 or $5 trillion, right? That's for individual income tax. And by the way, 48 or 49% of all federal tax revenues comes from individual income tax. Okay? So what's next? And that's 2.43 trillion. And what's next on that list?
There's payroll tax. Did we talk about that yet?
And that's a lot too.
1.71 trillion.
Yeah, that's like probably 40% of all of our taxes, right? Then there's, I'm not even totally sure what excise taxes are. I think it's on alcohol. It's on tobacco. It's, I think. I heard it referred to as this. Yeah, you look it up while I do the other thing. What is excise tax? Then there's estate tax, which basically means you die. And if your estate is of a certain value, you have to pay tax on it. The recipients have to pay tax on it. And then gift taxes and customs duties. Did you find out what excise tax is?
It says on specific goods, legislated tax on specific goods serviced at a time they are purchased.
And I'm guessing it's things like there are things like cigarettes in there,
alcohol, tobacco.
Yeah, fuel. That's why, and maybe even gambling. That's why they call it a sin tax, I think. But I don't know. But it's excise tax. And by the way, excise tax is $100 billion. So imagine, just to get the frame of reference, individual income tax is $2.43 trillion, and corporate is $530 billion. Excise tax is $100 billion. So anyway, now the question is: so we make $5 trillion. What do we spend?
Right.
You know what we spend.
6.75 trillion.
6.75 trillion. Okay. Now there's a thing called a surplus and a thing called a deficit. Yeah. A surplus is when we make more than we spend. Yeah. You can guess what a deficit is.
Yes.
The opposite, right? We spend more than we make. We have been in deficit spending a lot since 1970. I don't know what it was before that. I think there have been 4 surpluses since 1970. 4 years where we made more than we spent, okay? So we're killing ourselves, right? And 2 of those years were in the 90s by Bill Clinton. He had 2 years of surpluses, right? Nobody from 2000 on has had a surplus. But anyway, so the reason we have a deficit is because we have 6.75 trillion in spending. We have 4.92 or 5 trillion in revenues. And here's where, this is important, here's where we spend money. Because you say to yourself, can't we just cut costs to get a balanced budget so that we can have a surplus maybe, right? We're spending 1.35 trillion on Social Security. I mean, these are people who have been paying in for their entire careers, and then they retire and they want money back, right? And by the way, they're not even getting a lot of money back because it's not like it was in an investment account for them. There was doubling and tripling, after every 10 years or so. It's just paying other Social Security recipients. So, and that's a whole separate podcast topic. The other is Medicare and Medicaid, which is 1.1 trillion. So that puts us up to 2.35 or 2.4 trillion with just Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. We have the national defense. That's almost $1 trillion, right? 945 billion. We have interest on our loans, right? This is interest on the loans that we have because we owe like $33 trillion to various people throughout the U.S. and some throughout the world. Interest on that last year was $878 billion, right? So another thing is non-Medicare, Medicaid health spending. There's a thing called the Children's Health Insurance Program, and there's the Affordable Care Act subsidies. That's almost $1 trillion as well. That's $878 billion, right? Then there's veterans benefits and services of like $405 billion. Wow. And that, by the way, all that, just that stuff is already $5.6 trillion, which already puts us $600 billion over what we made in tax revenues, right? Yeah. So you got to be thinking to yourself, can we do free healthcare? Okay. Well, we already have a $1.8 trillion deficit, and we need to put that into perspective. Okay. Because we're not going to buy new healthcare for everybody yet. Let's figure out what the $1.8 trillion deficit means. By the way, it's not a one-time thing. Our one-time thing is $33 trillion. Our deficit, the amount that we just lost last year, is $1.8 trillion. So if we don't want to do it again this year, we got to figure out a way to pay that $1.8 trillion. We have to cover it, right? Mm-hmm. We can either do it by cutting costs, but you have to cut $1.8 trillion out of $6.75 trillion. That's like 25%. Yeah. 25% of every dollar would have to be eliminated, or we raise taxes, right? So there are 160 million people who filed tax returns in 2024. How many of those people do you think paid taxes? Out of 160 million, a bunch of them didn't actually pay any taxes. They filed returns, but they didn't make enough. Like if you make $30,000 a year or less, you only pay like an effective tax rate of 1.5% tax. 1.5% tax, right? So your buddy says he's paying 25%. What does he make?
I think he makes 30 grand.
30 grand. He's actually paying 1.5% effective tax rate if he makes 30 grand, right? But anyway, ignore that for a moment. 160 million people pay taxes, file taxes, 160 tax filings occur each year. They could be joint filings, right? 60 million of those don't pay any tax. So there's really only 100 million filings each year, tax filings that actually pay tax. So if you want to cover $1.8 trillion deficit, every one of those tax filers who pays taxes would have to pay an extra $18,000 per year. Yeah. Per year. Yep. Right? It's not a one-time thing. This is a deficit, not a debt. It's a deficit. So now let's go to free health care for all, okay? So after paying $18,000 extra per year for 100 million filers, I don't want to pay another $18,000, but after doing that, now we got to figure out how to get health care for everybody, right? It's kind of like Medicare for everybody, right? So that would cost, I checked 6 different think tanks who came up with numbers, and they added in stuff like the single payer system would be able to leverage medical device companies, leverage drug companies, leverage doctors to get prices down, right? You get rid of the private insurance companies, the government runs it, scary thought, but the government runs it, and they can get the prices down because they have the power, the big buying power, right? So they basically tell people, yeah, you'll still make money, but we're going to charge you, you're going to charge us less per, we're going to give you more volume, right? Because we do everything for everybody now. With all those things taken into account, they figured it would cost $3.5 trillion, okay? So let's see what that really means. Remember, the numbers again. We generated last year $5 trillion in revenues. We spent $6.75. We have a $1.8 trillion deficit. So it's actually 4.92. So $1.8 trillion deficit. We're already behind. But here's the cool thing. We spent $2 trillion on Medicaid, Medicare, the Children's Health Program, and the Obamacare subsidies, right? That's $2 trillion. So really the deficit would be another 1.5 trillion in order to pay for free healthcare for everybody, right? And by the way, I'm using the term free. It's not free if you're paying for it, right? And we're still paying for it. So $1.5 trillion would mean another $15,000 per year for each filer, okay? So the question is, how could we afford to pay that? Well, Sweden can do it, right? Because that's what your friend said. Sweden and Norway do it. Why can't we? We're bigger than they are, right? Well, so I did a little searching, and Sweden has an average personal income tax rate of 52%. Not 1.5%, not 25%, 52%. So imagine this. You pay 25% federal tax rate for an income of $200,000 a year. So if you're paying adjusted gross income of, let's say, $200,000, you're probably at a 25% tax rate. I might be wrong, but it's not that far off. So let's say, to be conservative, let's say 30%, okay? So if you're going to pay an extra 20%, it's actually going to be an extra 22% in Sweden. 20% of $200,000 is an extra 40 grand a year you'd be paying in taxes, right? At a $200,000 salary. What about a $100,000 salary? You'd be paying an extra 20 grand a year in taxes. That hurts. It's more than the 15,000 every taxpayer has to pay for the delta between, the new deficit that would be created with free healthcare, right? The reason the Swedes can do it is they pay a ton in taxes. They're paying for it. It's not free for Swedes. They're paying for it.
Yeah.
Norway, they have an average personal income tax rate of 57.3%, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So the question is, how do they pay for it? Well, they tax the crap out of people, and it's not free. The people pay it. Oh, Canada has free healthcare, right? So I don't know what their tax rate is, but I have a friend who has employees in the US and Canada. And get a load of this. They have free healthcare for Canadian citizens. But it's such a bare bones plan that my friend has to pay for private health insurance in Canada for his Canadian employees so that they get the same health coverage that we get in the US. So if you compared the two plans, the Canadian plan is way weaker than the US plan that's private insured. So he has to pay for riders for Canadian employees so that they get the same thing that the US people get.
Wow.
And my college roommate is Canadian, and he used to come to the US for services because he said he had to wait for so long for everything because it's free and there's, probably more people use the system. I'm guessing more people would. Would you use it more if it were free?
I mean, of course, yeah.
I know I would. I went to get physical therapy because my wrists are killing, right? Because I'm an old guy with arthritis. And my right shoulder is killing. And they said it would cost me $150 per time. And I'd have to go 3 times a week for like 3 months. And I'm like, it doesn't come out of my health plan.
Right.
I'm like, I'm not going. So I didn't go. So I haven't gone. I'm just going to suck it up. But if it were free to me, I would be going. So I think more people would use the system if it were free.
Naturally.
Yeah. So get back to the question of free healthcare. Again, it's not free. It's really national healthcare that we pay for in tax dollars. So how would that happen, right? Your friend says he pays 25% taxes on his $30,000 salary, and he wants free healthcare for that.
Without realizing all these things.
All these things, yeah. And by the way, I want it too, right? I share your buddy's view, right? I want free healthcare. But there's no money for it. The numbers don't work. We're not rich. We are broke. Our debt is so big that we pay $878 billion last year in interest on our loans because we have such a massive debt that we can't pay back. I don't know how we pay this debt back. I don't know if the people in Congress are smart enough to figure out how to pay back a $33 trillion debt when we only generate $4.9 trillion per year at a $1.75 trillion deficit. I don't even know how you balance the budget, right? These are hard problems. These are big brain problems to solve. And it doesn't surprise me that your friend or many, many, many other smart people, I'm sure he's a smart guy, many other smart people don't understand how big this problem is and why we don't have free health care. And we probably won't even have, probably have to cut like Medicare and Social Security benefits at some point. Somehow we have to bring the costs down and bring the revenues up. So it's probably a question that we need both increased taxes. I hate to say that because I hate paying taxes.
Yeah.
And decreased costs. I hate to say that because nobody wants to decrease services, right?
Yeah.
But how else do you balance that in such a way that we can even start breaking even and getting a surplus again?
By significant percentages, it seems like, we would have to increase by quite a bit, right?
Well, taxes by a lot. I mean, like I said, if you want to just break even, we'd have to increase the tax filers that actually pay taxes would have to pay $18,000 each more per year in taxes. And for if you make $100,000 a year, that's another 18%.
Wow.
18%. If you make $200,000 a year, that's 36%, right, of your adjusted gross.
Yeah. What do you think about a person that says, well, they can afford it?
Yeah, well, that's how they afford it, right? You want to pay 52% in taxes? Well, we can afford it too. We can afford it if everyone's willing to jack up our average tax rate to 52%.
Yeah.
We can afford it too, but who wants to do that?
I wonder their complaints in Sweden and Norway. Are they complaining about this?
I don't know. I always hear that they love paying taxes, but I don't know. I don't know. Too bad we don't have our friend Candace on the podcast because she lived in Sweden for 5 years. So maybe she'd say, we're cool with it because we get good services. And by the way, we if we were doing that all these years, we'd probably be used to it too, right?
Yeah.
It's like you just pay all this money, but think about it, 52% taxes, that's more than half your income.
They're probably like the population and the demographics are drastically different too.
Oh yeah. Do a search. How many people are there in Sweden? I'm gonna guess 35 million.
10 million.
10 million.
10 million.
10 million. I was way off.
49 million. 10.49 million.
Okay, 10.4 million. And, maybe it's more manageable because we have 341 million people in this country.
Yeah.
And, we have a very diverse group in the U.S. I mean, we have everything, right? We have by the way, how are we on time?
We're good.
Okay. We have the rich, the poor, the tall, the short. I mean, we got it all. And we have 341 million of them. So maybe that's a little more complicated.
Yeah.
So the question is, how would you do it, right? How would you get free health care for everyone? First of all, we're already paying $2 trillion for, not free, because Medicare is not free, but it's really good price, right? Medicare, Medicaid, you said you're on Medicaid, right? Medicaid, Medicare, the CHIP plan, the Children's Health Program, and the subsidies for Obama, the Affordable Care Act. So with that, we're already spending $2 trillion. So how would we make it so that everybody has Medicare, essentially, which again still isn't free, but it's really cheap. And by the way, my brother Mike does a lot of work in the Medicare world, and he says it's pretty good too. Like he said, it's easy to navigate Medicare. So I guess the government's doing well at that. But at least from what Mike said. But anyway, I was thinking about it, and I pay so I have family health care, right? And I pay for 5 of us. There's 5 people on my family plan, 5 adults on my family plan. Olivia's 26. She just gets bounced off of it this year. But up until this year, we had 5 people. We paid last year between my payments and my company's payments, because they pay most of it. We pay $33,000 per year for family coverage, okay? $33,000 per year for family coverage. So I don't know if everybody pays that much, because I'm sure if you're single, it's probably more like $12,000 a year or something, or even $10,000 a year. But if you added up all the spending that companies do for private insurance and employees do out of pocket, I read one credible stat that said it's around $2 trillion. Okay, $2 trillion for what we're paying now anyway. The government's not paying it. We're paying it. So if the government said, hey, let's convert all the payments that you're spending anyway, the companies and the individuals, to taxes, right? We create a healthcare tax. And I have to pay, so of the $33,000, I think I paid a total of 8 or 9, and they paid a total of like 23 or 24, right? So let's say that my 8 or 9 went to a healthcare tax, okay? By the way, thinking of some crazy idea. I don't know if this would actually work. And let's say the company, the money they're paying, the 23 or 24, that goes into a healthcare tax, right? So now we essentially generate another, apparently from what this stat said, we have $2 trillion in private health insurance payments going out right now between companies and individuals. That covers the full gap of 1.5 trillion and maybe even reduces the cost a little bit. So maybe my 8 or 9 is more like 5 or 6. The company's 23 or 24 is more like 18 or 19. So maybe, because maybe, who knows, maybe they can be more efficient somehow, right? So if that's the case, then there'd be Medicare for everybody. I would actually save money, a little bit of money, and people that don't have health care would get health care, right? Except here's what I think would probably happen. You'd end up with a Medicare program that isn't that great.
Yeah.
And then people will still be buying private health insurance, which they do in other nations that have so-called free health care. They'd be still buying private health insurance so that it can give them more services, you know? So you pay all that money to your healthcare tax, then you end up paying more anyway, and that private insurance starts getting jacked up again. Before you know it, we're now paying $30,000 again for private insurance, and we're paying that money toward the federal government for the healthcare tax.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that would work, but it would be, we have to do something though, because either people have to be educated on why they don't get so-called free healthcare, or we have to figure out a way to get people free healthcare because people are getting pissed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're in a community of people right now that are like thinking, it's not just one guy, right? You have a lot of people thinking this way.
Yeah, it's like a whole movement. It's like a whole movement. Rebel against the, like you want to call it a complex or whatever, like the healthcare industry.
Yeah.
People are just upset and angry.
Yeah, well, the one, we had the assassination of that CEO of United Healthcare, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's about getting free healthcare, but I think it's about the fact that they feel like healthcare isn't taking care of the people, and maybe somebody else should do that, right?
Like it spins onto everything. I saw this post where they say they're gonna build like a hotel in space pretty soon, and the guy's like, "Can we just stop spending money on that and give me free healthcare?" Like everything gets
Everything. Oh, in other words, people are starting to use that as like the alternative to all spending.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, though, I don't know if the U.S. government is building a hotel in space. Maybe Elon Musk is building a hotel in space, but that would be a totally different thing, right?
Yeah.
But, the thing is about the government expenses is, again, people need to appreciate that we are already in the deficit. We're losing money every year.
Yeah.
And we can't just default because do you know who borrows most of this money? Who we borrow it from? Us. I mean, like probably 3/4 of our debt is owed to individuals who buy T-bills and, all kinds of federal securities, essentially, which are loans to the federal government.
Right.
Municipalities buy them, other governments, state governments buy them. So everybody's loaning the federal government money. So to default on it would totally screw all kinds of people in the U.S., right? I mean, a massive number of people in the U.S. And, we also have foreign creditors. I mean, you can't default, right? You have to pay your bills. So the question is, how do we do that? And I hope, Chris, that there are big brains in our representative group, our Senate and our Congress and our presidency who know how to solve this problem. Somebody's got to solve it because where does it fall on then? You. Yeah, it falls on you. Yeah, it falls on you because it's like every generation, there used to be an expression which was back when George W. Bush was in office, he was trying to solve the Social Security problem, which is a whole different problem, right? And he said he doesn't want to kick the can down the road any farther. But he couldn't solve it, so he ended up kicking the can down the road farther, right? But that means to you and your generation. So somebody in your generation, when the debt is like, I don't know, 50 trillion, and our annual spend on interest on our loan is like 2.1 trillion, it's a bigger problem to solve, right?
Yeah.
But, so what's the verdict on healthcare? Before we wrap, what's the verdict? Are we going to get free healthcare or not?
Well, I think it's clear to me because a lot of stuff I was unaware of. We need to find radical approaches to raising income, raising taxes, cutting like useless programs. I think those are sustainable.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. the cutting of useless programs. Because the Trump administration has this DOGE. Is it Doge? Remember the Doge coin or the Doggy coin or something like that? The Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, right? To cut costs. But when you look at where our money's being spent, I don't know where you cut costs because it's Social Security, it's Medicare, Medicaid, and then the children's program, and then the subsidies for the Affordable Care. It's the national defense. It's the interest on our loan. I mean, those things, and the veteran services, right?
Yeah.
Those things alone are like $5.6 trillion, and we only generate $4.92 trillion in revenue. So cost cutting would be really challenging. Somebody's got to innovate. And by the way, that might mean innovating around Social Security, innovating around healthcare, right? Innovating, like really come up with some new way to do it at a way lower cost. Innovating around our military, and then innovating more ways to make money, right? So that your buddy and a lot of other people, because again, we're kind of goofing on him a bit, but he's right.
Yeah.
We do pay taxes. We should have health care, right? People shouldn't be without health care.
Right.
But how do you do that?
Yeah.
And that's the big question that hopefully we have I think 1.8 million viewers now. Of our 1.8 million viewers, 1.9 now?
Yeah.
1.9 million viewers. Maybe we'll get some good comments and tell us how can we give free health care to everybody, and how can we give national health care to everybody? Because again, it's not free.
Right.
We're paying for it. How can we do it in a way that we don't have to spend more money?
Yeah, I wish there was a way to see all the things we spend money on. Like, what are these useless programs we talk about? And where does it
even
break
within
into?
the categories, right? Like
Yeah.
within defense,
Yeah.
within Social Security,
Yeah.
within Medicaid, Medicare, because all we're seeing is the giant
Yeah.
category budget. There's probably 1,000, 10,000 line items associated with each. Wouldn't it be kind of cool to go through each of these?
Yeah.
It would take a lot. That's not a podcast. That's 2 weeks.
That's
With all the right information
Yeah.
and people that are way smarter than us in the room, right?
Yeah.
To see what that is. But anyway, so hopefully your friend will get his free healthcare at some point, and we'll all get it at some point. But
Yeah.
we need to innovate, right?
Yes, sir.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.